Kia ora, everyone. Welcome to the Auckland Debating Society third speaker seminar. So this seminar specifically focused on third speaking in a 3v3 style. There are some similarities with the way that speaking whip in a BP style and speaking third in a 3v3 style operate, and I will canvass them. But I want to note that this is a seminar that is specifically targeted at third because it is quite a particular and specific speaking position. And while some of the stuff I discuss is obviously of broad application, you can even use it if you're not speaking third at all. It'll give you the greatest value if you apply it within the context of third speaking, whether it be at at UADC or whether it's at Australs or whether it's at World Schools. That's what this seminar is specifically focused on. What I'm going to talk about then is firstly, who can be a third speaker and why people should take a more expansive and flexible view of their speaking positions than they potentially do under the status quo. Then I'll talk about the difference between speaking third and speaking whip and why speaking third is such a specific position. Then I'll talk about the basic things that every third speaker should have in mind when they're thinking about the goals of their speech, the attitude that they should have, and how they should be addressing the rest of the debate in order to have a maximum impact. Then we'll discuss a couple of specific targeting techniques that are particularly useful at third speaking, stuff like flipping, stuff like marginalizing. Then we'll have a bit of a discussion about what you do before your speech as a third speaker, be it in prep or during the debate. And finally, talk about the types of drills that you can do to make yourself a better third speaker. And while, of course, these are drills that can be useful in any speaking position, they are particularly hone the types of things that you need to be a good third speaker. So first thing we'll discuss, who can be a third speaker? I started speaking third before my last ever Australs. I had been repeatedly put into the third speaker position and like bottled it trial after trial because I really liked replies, and people were like, of course, good at replies, must be good at speaking third. It was not true. The good thing is, though, is that just with time in debating, your ability to think through things and your familiarity with positions change such that things you were once bad at can be something that you become good at. And what I'd encourage everyone to do, especially if you're a younger debater, is to do as much experimentation with your positions as possible. Because if you're not branching out into different positions, if you're not exercising the muscles that might help you become a good third speaker, even if all it does is serve to reaffirm your love for your traditional speaking position, you should take those opportunities to experiment, because it might reveal something to you that you don't know, and it might make you better at all of the positions because you have a greater understanding of how those positions operate, their needs, and what makes their life easier from the other speakers within a debate. So anyone can speak third eventually, in my opinion, so spend time exercising that muscle, spend time experimenting in that regard. Second thing I'm going to talk about is the difference between being a third speaker and a whip. What you are doing as a third speaker in Australs is, in my opinion, more difficult than what you're doing as a whip. And the reason why I say it's more difficult is not to say that there's less skill involved or it is I'm not really making a normative judgment about which position is better. What I'm saying is that what third requires you to do is probably the most pressurized, mentally demanding position in probably like all debating, because there's very few places to hide and there's very few ways to creatively get out of problems when those problems are faced with you. When you're a third speaker, it is a little bit sink or swim. Either you have the final response to the very, very complex Austral style analysis that has been built up across two previous speakers, or you don't, and you lose the debate. Whereas when you are speaking whip or when you're speaking any BP position, there's a lot more gamesmanship, a lot more technical things you can do to wheedle in and out of positions, to subtly reframe the debate in ways that means you can kind of just ignore or lid certain questions. That's unfortunately not what you can do at third. At third, you have to try and figure out what are the answers to the most difficult questions in the debate. How can I extend, even though two people from each side have spent 8 minutes already analyzing and developing arguments, and how do I end up winning those arguments? So what I encourage you to do to speak third is to do a lot of it because it requires something that is a lot more demanding than other positions. And if you're not spending that time actually developing your skill as a third speaker, actually sitting at the end of the debate, allowing the whole debate to go before you, and then being put in the position where it's sink or swim, you have to add stuff or your team won't win, you won't develop that type of muscle memory, you won't develop the skills that are necessary to be good at a third speaker. That's not to say the stuff that you can do it with isn't also like a lot of fun to do, but there's a lot more technical gamesy things you can do to get out of tough spots at width that you simply can't do as a third speaker. So what are the goals of the third speaker, and how should you be thinking about your position and your role? And this, of course, informs all of the way that you then approach speaking third in all of the different examples that I'll give you of different techniques that you can use. So what you need as a third speaker, the first thing you need to stand up and do is establish the very clear comparative, what are the two positions that are being compared in a debate, and a very clear framework of the debate. How should the judge be breaking down the different issues that they care about and hopefully come to a decision? The reason why it is so important for a third speaker to do this stuff, and I know at the end of the debate, you're probably thinking, well, of course the comparative is already established, of course the framework is already established, is because there's fuzziness early in the debate, often, about what are the important things in the debate or the different pathways to victory, and what really are we comparing within the debate. And you simply need to put those questions to bed as a third speaker. You need to establish this is what the debate is about. If there is ambiguity about what the debate is about, you need to address that ambiguity and either resolve it or say, regardless of which way adjudicator you decide to resolve that ambiguity, here's how we are still able to win. And you need to have a very clear vision of what am I doing within this speech in order to win the debate, because there's not really much room to just build things in the debate in the hopes that it'll become apparent why they are important. You need to be able to finish those arguments because you are essentially, beyond the replies, you are the last one who's able to do something really substantive with them. So after I've thought about, well, what is the comparative? What specifically are we comparing in the debate? What are the ambiguities or messiness that has existed in the debate about that? And I've asked myself, what are the different things that the teams have cared about? Why have they presented their arguments in the way that I have? And what do I think the judge will, at this moment in time, be thinking this is the important material in the debate? I asked myself the question, what is the minimum I need to do to win? And of course, the flip side of that answer is what is the minimum that the other side needs to do to win the debate? Because the first question that you just ask yourself is how do I stop the other team from winning the debate? How do I just win the debate before I have any of the other benefits that I might want to prove in the debate? What is the minimum I need to win this debate? And then you need to figure out how you're going to do it. Often the first clash that I have, or the first thing that I will add to the debate, is a very clear vision for the judge. If I'm able to establish this, or if I'm able to beat this bit of analysis from the opposition, we will win this debate. They have no pathway to victory. I'm able then to structure my speech off of that foundation. And sometimes a little bit is about acknowledging a trade-off. Say you have one really good point with some benefits and they have a good point with harms. Sometimes what the minimum I need to do to win the debate is demonstrating that the benefits you get from your point outweighs the harms that come from the other person's point, and you can acknowledge that trade-off exists, but you need to have that clear vision of how do I win the debate? What are the things that I'm going to be adding additionally from where the debate is right now in order to win it? And that I think touches on the second thing that is important to think about. What am I adding to the debate? And that comes from a very clear understanding of where is the debate already. As a third speaker, you should understand and have a clear vision of what has happened in the debate up until that point, so that you can tell the judge, this is where your mind is now. This is probably where you're resting on the issues. And what I am able to add will either reinforce what you believe about those issues or shift you away from that prior understanding. And so once you've asked yourself those preliminary questions and you've really considered what is your pathway to victory, how do I clarify those essential questions, you need to think about then the two goals of a third speaker. And the two goals of a third speaker is firstly to finish points. They need to basically carve out of the debate something tangible that the judge can hold, the judge can consider, and then weigh when they're trying to decide the debate. And you need to convince the judge that your other speakers have been doing a phenomenal job, because that then makes it a lot easier. Not only do you finish the arguments, but you make the judge feel like they were always finished, and there was always that glowing potential in those points that then will allow them to weigh it. When you're thinking about finishing and cheerleading or making the other speakers look good, some of it is stylistic. It's about the way that you present the arguments or the finality that you address them with, the way in which you weave in and identify bits of other analysis that the other speakers have brought. But at its foundation, it's about acknowledging where is the point now, at the point that I'm addressing it before I've added my analysis. Where is it going to be when I'm finished? Why am I going to put this beyond doubt? And why is this something concrete that the judge can take away and think about when they're weighing up the debate? So essentially, just as an overview, you need to conclude the types of messy questions that often plague the first half of the debate. And that's the first thing you need to do in order to make sure that then you can address the debate in a clean way. You need to identify what is the minimum I need to do to win. How do I stop them winning? And then what is additional to that material? And then you need to make sure that you're creating concrete bits of analysis. This is the specific impact that this point is going to have. This is why you should care about it. And this is how my earlier speakers have given you valuable ways of thinking about it that then you turn into that concrete thing that the judge can hold and take away. And that, of course, adds up because you've done the clear comparative and framework into why do you win the debate. So that's the overarching approach that a third speaker needs to have. And it needs to be very disciplined. A lot of problems that happen with third speakers is they get off on tangents or they fail to be able to really clearly understand what am I doing in this debate. And that's always where a third speaker goes off the rails, because when you're a third speaker, there's just so much stuff sitting in the debate. So if you're just trying to address every single thing within the debate, you're never going to have the impact that you really want. What we'll discuss now is a couple of the techniques that I think are particularly valuable to use as a third speaker. And I'll just go through a list of them now and then address them one by one. So the first thing to talk about is narrative analysis, as opposed to simply throwing in mechanisms or throwing in impacts or throwing in context, creating a narrative. Secondly, flipping material, and this is particularly useful as a third speaker where there are limitations about how new the material that you can bring is in a debate. Thirdly, marginalizing, which is a technique of exposing weaknesses that exist within opposition's arguments that raise a doubt within the judge's mind, even if you're not able to highly effectively rebut them. Fourthly, washing, and how do you take deadlocks within the debate and manipulate them such in the way that the judge, when they're going through the pathway to victory, is likely to overcredit your material and undercredit other people's material. And then finally, complexity argumentation. And what I mean by that is you have latitude as a third speaker to be more precise and elevate the arguments in a way that then allows you to have an impact on the debate within the confines of not being able to bring new arguments to the debate. So let's address those 5 different techniques, one after the other. So in terms of narrative analysis, what I mean is to tell a story about how your point operates such that the judge can take something concrete out of that point rather than it just being a collection of context, mechanisms, and impact. And often the feedback I give to people is when a point is kind of not working and they can't understand why the point is not working, or there's some small problem that you're trying to frame out of the debate in order to beat some analysis from the opposition that you think is quite plausible and quite difficult to beat just on its own merit. What I will tell teams to do is to tell me the story of that point from start to finish. So say you have a complex point about educational achievements for minority children. What I'm going to want you to do as a third speaker with all of those different mechanisms and people claiming this and people claiming this is to just walk me through that story start to finish. So literally from the moment that child goes to school, what happens to them? Where do they go? Where do they sit? How does it impact the way that they think about things? And when you're giving me that narrative, you can then weave in the bits of like ordinary structural analysis, such in a way that firstly, it's really concrete for the adjudicator. They can see that child going to school and having those experiences. And it helps you just fill in the gaps that often your earlier speakers will have left when they're trying to establish the bones or the structure of a particular point. And this is like something that third speakers really need to be careful of. What they're doing is not just repeating the analysis of the earlier speakers, they're attempting to finish that analysis. And often that means they have to paper over the cracks in the analysis that exist before. So if you are able to attach the structural analysis that has been thrown around in the rest of the debate to a specific story of how people actually do things, what does it look like for each of those steps of analysis to play out in a particular person's life or a particular example's life, that will just give you a much greater dexterity in trying to fix the problems with that analysis and make sure that at the end of the point, the judge can really see how much it has an impact on X group of people. That's not to substitute structural analysis. You still should isolate and say, and this is where my second speaker explained this really important mechanism, that's how you weave in that analysis, nor is it a substitute from then at the end of that point, linking it into that broader structural analysis and being like, well, here's the scope of the outcomes that happen, not just the specific example, but it's a really helpful tool to focus you on the things that need to be fixed within a point and make sure that there's no gap within the analysis that the judge can then allow doubt to be raised in a reply or doubt to be raised in the opposition's third speech. Second technique is flipping. And what I mean by flipping is taking an argument that the opposition have brought substantively, so say a harm that they're establishing in the debate, and attempting to make it into a point for you. So this can be really useful because essentially what it allows you to do is bring a new harm within the debate by flipping the analysis from opposition or an impact that the opposition wants to talk about and really putting them on the back foot. And this I think is quite important at third affirming, because at third negating, like if the third affirming hasn't added much to the debate, they have a lot of latitude just to nitpick things and open gaps that then you have very little opportunity to try and knit up yourself. But if you're aggressively flipping material, they have to do a lot more work rebuilding their analysis. And if they then let that stuff slide through, your own reply speaker can whip it in a way that is effective. So how should you approach flipping? I think there are a couple of I think there are probably two things I think about when I'm trying to flip analysis. Oh, no, sorry, three things I think about when I'm trying to flip analysis. So the first is is there any response that I can give to a particular part of the mechanism that they've given where I can not only just stop it, so break the chain of the analysis they're giving, but try and reverse the flow. And that's like a useful goal to set yourself, because it means that you're thinking creatively about how do I actually not just beat a particular part of analysis or beat a particular mechanism. It thinks about, well, when I have beaten the mechanism, can I go further with beating that mechanism and really push it such that it is flipping. And often there'll be an analysis that is just like, this is something that happens. This is the way that someone reacts to it, and this is a particular outcome. So how flipping in that particular argument can work can be like, this is how they've said someone reacts to a particular stimulus. I'm able to prove that's not how they react. Very few times, it's not actually that common to prove that just nothing happens. Often you'll be saying, well, actually someone will be thinking about it like this. And if you say someone will be thinking like this, you just go the extra step and say, and that actually has the inverse effect of what the opposition was describing. Here's how I can actually flip that argument. The second thing I'm looking for is countervailing trends. So this is not necessarily trying to flip a particular part of their mechanism. It's building in a new mechanism that then changes the way that the overall debate operates. So say, for example, they've brought one argument about how students work within a particular, the students' brains work when they're faced with a particular problem. If you then think about, well, students, it may be true that students react in this way, but I think teachers will act in a way that not only mitigates, but actually reverses the overall effect, because then they'll interact with students in a way that boosts their overall grade. You can flip analysis in that way. So you're looking for countervailing trends, or basically independent mechanisms that operate in the inverse direction from the arguments that you have brought before. And then I think the final thing to note when you are flipping is I'm thinking about over-rebutting. So trying to basically setting myself a goal that is not just pushing something to a standstill, but going as far as possible I can in removing that point. Because note, if you attempt to flip something, but you don't manage to flip something, because you're pushing as far as you can, you're likely to mitigate that point as much as is humanly possible. And sometimes when you just try and think of mitigatory rebuttal, how do I reduce the importance? How do I cause doubt that the mechanism operates the way they describe, the most that you can do is prove that there is a zero effect. And often you're not going deep enough into trying to rebut that argument to actually get the full amount of gains, either in mitigation or in actually to the degree that it is flipping. So just to sum that up, you're thinking about flipping or redirecting internal mechanisms. You're thinking about countervailing mechanisms or countervailing trends that might not exist within the mechanisms that have currently been brought in. And you're thinking about like over rebutting. What is the maximum I can do to deal with this point, even if you're not capable of flipping? Over rebutting or going like pushing as hard as you can on trying to establish that other things will happen will normally have the maximal mitigation effect that you're seeking as well. So third technique we'll discuss, and I apologize for going quickly. A lot of stuff to discuss here. The third thing that we'll discuss is marginalization. And marginalization is really cheeky. It's really annoying. The Australians are very good at it. And what I mean by that is it's identifying where the impact or weighing done by an opposition team is not quantified or not specified in a way that allows them to make it meaningful within the debate. And often what that will look like is, say, for example, someone brings a point about why X thing will increase racism. And they might be really convincing at establishing that X thing like locks into pre-existing racial biases that people have, such that it could plausibly lead to more racism. What you do with a marginalizing response is not to attempt to deny that it is true that it increases racism, but to point out it is very difficult to quantify the effect of that increased racism such that it is more like meaningful within the debate. And essentially what this is doing is decreasing the elasticity of a point. And by elasticity, I mean the susceptibility to change of a particular context or of a particular like actor within a debate, such that even if they demonstrate that the thing they're talking about is true, it has a negligible effect. And like, for example, if you talk about like racism, you can say, well, most people's actual racial prejudices tend to not have an effect, because as soon as someone is even minorly racist, they start pushing up against societal barriers that stop them expressing it in a particular way. And those thresholds are quite difficult to get over for it to even be meaningful for them to then act on that analysis. And there's like 1,000 things that are impacting people's racial prejudices, such that this one additional thing that, yes, might make them more racist, might lock into their existing racism, has very little impact within the debate. And essentially what this punishes teams for is not telling that story start to finish, which is why narrative analysis is important. They haven't explained what the marginal difference of that point is. This is why it's called marginalizing. They haven't explained what the marginal difference of what the change they propose happens within the debate. And it kind of allows you to trivialize it, to say that it won't have a particularly large effect because they haven't done the work on specifying, here is how much it'll increase people's racial prejudices and how susceptible the group is to it. And here is then how people's behavior will change flowing on for it. If they haven't been disciplined in proving those particular aspects of the debate, it allows you to decrease the relative importance of that compared to other stuff. So often you'll have a clash between what this will cause backlash, people will become more racist, versus this helps the material conditions of people of color. And you can decrease the backlash argument by pointing out the fact that this is likely to be a very small part of people's overall conception of an issue. Therefore, even if it is true what they've said and they've attached very strong language to it, the marginal difference is going to be quite small. So when you've been flipping, when you've been marginalizing, often this brings you to the final conclusion of washing. And washing is a technique by which you assess all of the points within the debate. You ask yourself, and it's kind of like it's a variation on what you're just doing when you're weighing. You take all of the points, you think, after I've done my flipping, after I've done my marginalizing, what has happened to all of the points within the debate? And if there are points with particular messiness or particular unclarity or particular uncertainty, and often when you're flipping and marginalizing, what you're doing is introducing uncertainty within a point, even if you're not able to defeat that point, That then allows you to basically claim that you've achieved parity on a particular issue and then moving to another point. So say, for example, there are 2 points operating within a debate. It's the racist backlash argument versus the material conditions argument. Say it's a debate about like giving money to people of color just on that basis. And some people says it will make people more racist. And some people say, well, it helps you purchase things. What you can do with washing is to claim it is very obviously true that if you are giving money to minorities, they will get money. It is contrastingly plausible that there'll be an increase of racism, but I've demonstrated that it's likely to be quite an uncertain outcome. And what I'm able to do is then just to wash that out of the debate. Just be like, in the end, neither team is really going to convince you one way or the other. So what you should give the debate on is the more concrete material that is more important. So essentially there, what you're looking for is to wash things out of the debate, to get rid of that analysis by pointing out that there's an uncertainty or at least like frontline responses that you've given, and then trying to inflate the importance of those frontline responses or that uncertainty to make certain analysis more important than other analysis. The last thing I'll discuss is complexity argumentation. And this is where you can elevate the debate and should be looking for opportunities to elevate the debate rather than just allow the debate to exist where it was. And what I encourage the third speakers to do, especially if they want to be an excellent third speaker, is to ask how you can increase the precision of your arguments beyond what has been brought before. And say, for an example, there's an argument, it's a debate about like India-Pakistani relationships, and there's an argument that there might be a risk of nuclear war, or this might escalate tensions in a particularly dangerous way. What you will want to do is to try and actually figure out what is the risk of something happening. Are we risk averse? How should we be thinking about making those decisions? Because at the beginning of the debate, it really is just kind of like this thing will happen or this thing will happen. And by the end of the debate, you understand the strength of relative arguments, and you understand that it will be very difficult to prove that one thing or the other will happen. So the debate is about actually like certainty, and it is about risk. And similarly to what you're doing with washing, which is just basically applying this framework to particular points to try and knock them out of the debate, what complexity argumentation will do is ask deeper questions about, are we comfortable with certain risks? Even if neither team is able to win, this is what I think the certainty versus risk trade-off with each particular argument, and then making arguments that are basically like, if you don't know if it's going to go one way or the other, or if you think it's a 60-40 chance, here's why we would be risk averse, or here's how we choose to take that risk, and that can elevate the argument beyond just the kind of sometimes flat claims that are made in debating. So there are 5 techniques that if you work on building them into your third speeches and building both their attitude and their specific application into your third speeches will help you lift those arguments. Sometimes it'll feel a little forced, sometimes it'll feel a little awkward, especially when you're trying to do these things for the first time. But a lot of the time it's actually just an internal logic, and people won't use the language of flipping or marginalizing or washing, but it'll be the things that they do because that is what comes naturally to them because they've ingrained it into them. Okay. Second to last thing I'm going to discuss is what should you be doing as a third speaker before you get to the end, before you get to your speech. So essentially, you're about to start speaking. That is actually like well into your contributions to the debate. What should you be doing in prep? What should you be doing during the debate? During prep, you should be trying to help your first speaker and second speaker, and you should be making sure that you understand their arguments inside and out. You shouldn't be dictatorial or trying to control everything, because your first and second speaker need to have an understanding of what they're going to do, but you should kind of have an idea in your mind of, well, this is what I think is likely to be strong in our case, this is what I think is likely to be weak in our case, and then to update it as the analysis rolls on, because it's quite easy as a third speaker to mentally check out when you are prepping. Don't allow that to happen. Make sure you understand your arguments inside and out. And this leads to my next bit of feedback. During the 2 first speeches, essentially what you should be doing is taking notes as if you are an adjudicator with your like side thoughts, because it's not that important that you line by line rebut the first negating speaker, but you need to firstly understand whether your first speaker has missed anything important. And often it'll become apparent either your first speaker has missed something or you as a team have missed something when you're listening to your first speaker's argument. And if you're taking those notes, you very clearly can understand what I've got to fix. My first speaker has this excellent point that doesn't work because they haven't done X thing. When I stand up and speak about it, I can say, it's important to note that this thing happens, and then I unlock all of that argumentation. And if you're just really putting together your speech in those first two speeches, then it's likely the debate will evolve past you, or you simply won't have, like a lot of the stuff that you'll have written down in your paper isn't relevant. So I always take notes of the first speaker's speeches as if I am an adjudicator and I'm trying to understand the gaps in their analysis. And I'm applying basically just like how can I understand the issues so that I can answer those initial questions that I was offering. Last thing I'm going to discuss is what drills should you be doing as a third speaker? And I think speaking third uses a slightly different skill sets to other speeches, because you both have to have a very strong grasp of how do I get to a pathway to victory? If you're a line-by-line responder at third, unless you're one of the best line-by-line responders in the world, it's likely you won't be efficient enough to be able to answer every question. You necessarily need to do prioritization and have a clear understanding of what do I need to do to win the debate. And you're also required to take in that enormous amount of information and process it in a way that is very fluid, because you're responding to like stuff that comes out of their third speaker or their second negating speaker, which can often have enough value to swing the debate. So I think two things are very valuable to do if you're training as a third speaker. The first is to adjudicate a lot, watch a lot of debates, judge a lot of debates, because that's essentially what you're doing during the two first speeches. And formulating, here's how the two teams are going to win the debate when you're judging is almost identical to what you're doing as a third speaker, just from within the debate, asking yourself, well, what are the different linchpins in the debate? What are the key issues that swing us one way or the other? So do a lot of adjudication. And the second thing you need to do is build up your verbal fluency and mental, basically like power by doing like mental exercise. And I find the most valuable form of mental exercise is doing no notes speeches. So either within a practice debate or just giving like a first speech by yourself. Think of your arguments without writing anything down. You might give yourself 5 minutes of prep doing this, and then give a full-length speech, once again, without having everything written down. It puts a lot of mental strain on you, but it's very valuable for forcing your brain essentially to try and expand, to hold a lot of ideas within your head, to be able to speak extemporaneously off those ideas without there being any unfluency. And the more no-notes speeches that you do, the more comfortable you are processing all of that information that you get as a third speaker, figuring out your pathway to victory, structuring arguments in ways that flow logically, because those are all the things that you will be kind of slipping when you're doing a no-note speech doing. And if you record that no-note speech and listen back to it, you can clearly identify what you're doing well and what you're not doing well intuitively. I think the last thing that I would say is valuable to both first speakers and second speakers and third speakers, essentially everyone within a debate. And it's a little bit of a rebuke to some trends that have happened in current debating. Debating is about trust. And what I mean by that is you are saying things that you think are true. The other team is saying things that they think are true. Who wins the debate is not just the person who responds to the most things, who gives the most plausible versions, the most maximum, not most like most quantity, not most like quality version of the truth. It's actually about will the judge believe your claim, or will the judge believe another speaker's claim? And it's very important in this context to not just throw things at the wall in the hope that they will work. So not just throwing out every response you can, even if 10 of them are implausible, because what that leads the judge to believe is you don't believe the things that you are talking about. You are not confident in your own arguments. And that's a really dangerous place to be in, because if you are just giving me 1,000 mechanisms and 1,000 arguments and hyper responding to everything in ways that are inconsistent with your other arguments, you're not finishing the material. You're not giving the judge something clear and clean that they can take away. You're just convincing the judge that you don't really believe what you're talking about. So when you are rebutting, when you are thinking, and this is why it's so crucial to think about your pathway to victory, you need to have a clear vision of what is actually true. Like regardless of all of the gamesmanship and debating, regardless of all of the even ifs, and there's a danger in even ifs if you're bringing them in a way that is inconsistent with other material that you're bringing, think about what in an ideal world should the judge believe? What do I think is the most strong, reasonable, plausible analysis that I can bring? And you build everything off of there. And sometimes you acknowledge an ambiguity and you say, the judge may not agree with me in how I perceive this thing, but I to be clear, believe 100% that this is the thing that you should believe. But even if you don't believe that, here is how the debate then operates. And it needs to have a very strong, still overarching conclusion that you believe that first initial claim, because if you then in an even if argument bring a whole bunch of auxiliary arguments that then contradict that initial claim, the judge will think you're opportunistic, and the judge will not believe the tangible things that you want them to take away. That's all I have to talk about in terms of third speaking. Third speaking is a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed the seminar, and go watch the rest of the Auckland debating seminars.